fix my the distance.
And now it's live on YouTube. We are live on YouTube. So
Okay.
Kala, is it all right? Can you see me?
yeah, we can see you, no problem.
And can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but when you're speaking fast, maybe you're swallowing something, or I don't know if it is a trouble with your audio. I don't know. Satish will be able to.
No, it's okay now. It is okay now.
It is okay now, right?
Yeah, it is okay now.
Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Dr. Rana Hassan has logged in, Satish? Has
No,
he?
yes, not yet.
Not yet. Should I try calling him, or I think he will log in, I hope.
He will log in.
Yeah, still time is there.
He would most likely be at his residence now, being 7 o'clock.
No, he's very much in Delhi now, Professor Mathur.
Oh,
he's in India now. And Satish, what about our director? Professor Madheshwaran is here.
He is there already.
Okay.
He will come once time is. He's in a meeting there.
Okay.
Oh, Rana is operating from Delhi now.
No, not operating from Delhi. I think it's probably holiday time. They all have annual leave, right? I think probably he's on annual leave in Delhi. That's my guess.
Most people are working from home now anyway.
Yes. So, George, are the Christmas celebrations muted in the UK?
Well, yes, it's not going to be the standard Christmas people have here. I guess for everyone, it's all over the world the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Although there is some euphoria with the vaccine now.
Yeah, definitely. I think in India also, Dr. Vishal was telling me this morning that in January, the process of rollout of vaccination will start. And we don't know what to expect with that.
Yeah, of course.
Should I call Rana, or is it okay? Okay, he has not seen his WhatsApp since yesterday. So, should I just call Rana?
He's coming, madam. He is joining.
Okay, great. Because of 5 panelists, I'm a bit anxious. Hello, good afternoon, Rana.
Hi, Kala.
How are you?
Should I email my slides to you or no?
No, Rana. You please operate it from your end, because I think there will be some time lag between your thing and our thing, right? So last time it so happened that there was no correspondence between what I was saying and what slide they were showing of mine.
Right.
So to avoid such conflicts, it's that you
Director sir is here.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Professor Madheshwaran.
Good afternoon, Professor Kala. Good afternoon, Professor Rana, Professor George.
Good afternoon,
Professor
Mathur. Good afternoon.
I met Rana long back in 1999 when he was working at the East West Center, Hawaii.
Right.
Is that right?
I was with you for about a month time.
Right.
So now I had become old. You can't recognize me.
No. I do recognize you.
I was a small boy at that time. I was working at the Institute of Politics and Economics.
Oh, is that right? Okay. So you were in Honolulu, Professor Madesh.
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Yes,
Okay.
and Rana was given a talk also in our training.
Right.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It's so nice to meet you again.
Nice meeting you after 27 years now.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Okay, the world is small and round, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How are you, George?
I'm fine.
Connected from Germany, or?
No, I'm based in Oxford right now, but I'm professor at the University of Antwerp, Institute of Development and Policy there.
Okay.
But obviously, I'm working from home now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Professor Mathur, I also know you when I was a small boy. You may not recognize me when you were there in National Institute of Public Finance and Policy.
That's right. That's right. I was there for 19 years.
Yeah.
But I've been to ISEC a number of times.
Right.
I was a student.
I met you, I know you, and it's a long time gap.
It's a long time gap.
That is where at NIPFT, and Professor Mathur met first.
Kala, I was telling your director that I was a student of Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Oh,
Wow.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I'm the third batch of the D school.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Well,
I think
D
Rana
school-
also graduated from D school, no?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Much later.
In 1990.
I'm talking of 1954.
Right.
Long. I was the third batch.
So at present, Professor Rana, you are in ADP now.
I'm in ADB. That's right.
Oh, wonderful. Nice to hear.
Rana,
He's the director of research.
Kala tells me that you are in Delhi.
I'm yes, technically Noida, Uttar Pradesh, but yes, just across the Yamuna.
Yeah, was it Christmas vacation or?
No, I thought let me give my mother company. She's been alone for 7 months with this lockdowns and all. So I've been here 6 weeks. Yeah. So
That is good. That's very nice.
Yeah. No, it was good for her.
Yeah.
It's quite a strain, I think, even mentally for older people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be in lockdown.
To not be interacting much with people.
Yeah. And especially Delhi is very also polluted now, quite cold.
Yeah.
And with this pandemic, I know it's very stressful.
Right.
Yeah. Professor Madesh, our chairman, I think he logged in.
No. He logged in by 3:15.
Yeah. I was there.
And Satish, please call chairman to.
Yeah. I think he's coming.
Yeah.
It's 3:29.
Yeah, and Mr. Vizal also.
Yeah, Dr. Vishal has signed in a long time ago, but I think his video is not on. I mean, his video is on, but I think his title, photo, or whatever is there. He is logged in. Hello, sir, Professor Tarat. I think he's on mute. Hello, Professor Tarat. How are you?
Fine.
Good to see you.
Yeah. I can see Om Mathur. Yeah.
Very much here.
And Dr. Rana Hassan is here. Professor George Mavritas is here.
Hello, all of you.
Hello, everyone.
Very
Dr.
nice to meet
Vishal.
you, Professor Thorat.
Yeah.
And
Hello,
pleasure to
Dr.
meet you,
Vishal
but I wish we could meet in person. But I guess for now this will have to be.
Next time, hopefully, yes.
Yes.
I was in Manila, Rana, a few years ago, organizing a big conference there in the Asian Development Bank. We didn't have the opportunity to meet at that time.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see. On urbanization, I suppose.
Oh, no. That was an annual conference of the Global Development Network.
I see. Okay.
Jointly organized with the Asian Development Bank.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
So should we start, Professor Madesh?
No, Mr. Vizal, you please call him.
Okay.
Tell him that everybody join.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Professor Tarat.
Good afternoon.
In fact, I still remember, Professor Rana Hassan, you are with us for a dinner outside
I think
in Hawaii
Right.
with the participants. And,
Right.
I see Professor Om Mathur.
That's right.
Hello. Hello.
How are
I
you,
think
Dr. Pradhan?
we have met several times, I believe,
Good. Yes, very
in
much.
Delhi.
Yes.
In Delhi, yeah.
But I'm seeing
Hello,
you.
ma'am. We are just waiting for Dr.
Huh?
Vishal sir to join because everybody has joined. We are just.
Oh, I see Abhay Pethe here. Hello. He's
hi,
mute.
Abe. Oh, Abe is there. Professor Abe, how are you?
I'm fine, man.
It's a
Hi.
long time. Thanks.
Abhay Pethe, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Professor Pethe, I didn't recognize you. How are you?
I'm all right. That's
Yeah,
Kala,
yeah.
is it?
Yeah. We met in the University of Mumbai. You invited me, you to give a talk.
Yes, yes.
2014 or 2015, I don't remember.
Where are you, Abhay?
Ah,
Abhay, can you see me?
I can't see you, sir. I can hear you though, quite clearly.
Now I can see you very well.
Well, I'm sorry for
Just
that,
need
but
that answer.
I can't see you. Your video is off.
Not with my head. Not even my head. The blank one. With no hair.
Anyway, your voice is distinctive, so one always recognizes you from wherever. So,
Oh, you all well?
ಹಲೋ ಇನ್ನೂ ಜಾಯಿನ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲಲ್ಲ ವಿಶಾಲ್ ಸರ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಿಡಿಯೋನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಾ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಕಲಾ ಶ್ರೀಧರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಪರ್ಣವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬಂದ್ರ ಹೌದಾ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವೆಯ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ನಾವು ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ I think Dr. Vishal is joining in a few seconds. I called them twice already. So I told them that we are waiting for him to join to start the program.
In the government.
Yeah. I think he's just started.
Yeah,
I think he's just come.
fine.
Hello, Dr. Vishal. Nice to see you, sir.
Namaste, madam. Nice to see all of you.
Yeah. This is Professor Madheshwaran, our director is there. And the chairman of our
Good
board,
afternoon.
Professor Thorat is here.
Namaste, Dr. Madheshwaran.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Namaskaram.
Dr. Vishal, sir, is an IAS officer of the 2004 cadre, sir. Karnataka cadre, and he's also an MBBS doctor. So, which I thought is a very, very nice thing for him to contribute to this panel. So, that's the reason I invited him. So, can we kindly start?
Kala will start now.
Yeah, sure, please.
Good afternoon to everybody. It's very nice that, I congratulate my colleague, Professor Kala Sridhar, for her initiative to have a panel discussion on COVID and cities. And I'm delighted to note that the senior policymakers, internationally well-renowned economists, and those from multilateral funding institutions are panelists in this discussion, and also a very senior bureaucrat of our state also participating in the very interesting event. And to start with, before I give welcome address, I request our chairperson, Professor Sugata Thorat, Board of Governors of ISAC, to give some initial remarks.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. Let me express my appreciation for the institute that they have organized this important event. And I also thank the participants who have come, who have joined us. I won't say come, who have joined us from different parts of the world for this particular event. Some of them I know, only very few of them. Om Mathur, I used to meet him in Delhi, Abhay Pethe in Bombay, but the rest I know little about through their writing. I think it is an important theme that the institution has put up for a discussion. Very lively theme and very important theme. The COVID-19 is a life-changing event for all of us living in this country as well as the outside many other countries. And never before, I think, in our lifetime, we have seen such an event with such a multiple consequences, unknown multiple consequences. We never imagined that the COVID will have such an impact on multiple aspects. The disease like COVID certainly have impact on health. And there are many more earlier diseases where they have impact in terms of mortality, huge mortality. But I think one of the greatest casualty of COVID is the economy, and the consequences of closing down partially or fully closing down of the economy are devastating and very they have come with a very negative effect. I would not say anything in greater detail, but I have gone through the note prepared for this discussion conference that the basic theme would be the consequences of COVID-19, identify the sphere and the areas which we know the areas, but go into greater detail. But more important issue, it seems to me here, is to how to recover from this situation, and the center of discussion will be the strategies and the way out from this situation. Well, I need not say, everybody of us know that since the COVID has been accompanied by closing down of economy because of the reason that physical proximity was one of the reasons which needed to be avoided. The closing down of economy partially in many sectors has very significant impact. It lead to massive unemployment, and it lead to massive downfall or decline in the income of certain group of people, certain group of employee and worker. In India, all of you know that the worker in the informal sector, those who were on contract, those who were with short-term contract, and those were without any contract. All of them were without job and they were on the road. And precisely this is the section of the people who have less saving to fall back upon. They can carry on for some time. Government can help them a little. So the impact of displacement and unemployment is very severe, and we don't have the dimension of impact so far. We do not know what is the fall in the income, as a result of which what is the increase in hunger from 3 meal to 2 meal and 2 meal to 1 meal, and the impact on and malnutrition, particularly of the children. Now gradually we are getting reports of high casualty, high mortality among the children in rural areas and areas where unemployment is high, opportunities are very high. And so one of the indirect impact on health is through the malnutrition, which go back to fall in the income, underconsumption because of the high unemployment. So one of the greatest priority is how to recover the economy. Steps have been taken by the government to revive the businesses. So one of the challenge would be how to revive the businesses. But at the same time, the government has taken policies where they have put money in the hand of the people so that purchasing power is maintained and people buy the things. And that also gives an incentive to industry to revive. So both on demand and supply side, the government is working. And yet we do not have enough idea as to what is the ultimate impact. Informal sector seems to have been the most hard hit. So I think this conference is going to discuss the consequences of the close down, and at the same time, how do we recover the economy particularly non-farm economy, informal economy in cities and metropolises. The another obviously is the direct impact of health of COVID, and direct impact of health is of course obviously very visible. It turned into illnesses, it turned into huge mortality rate among the people of certain section of the people. Extremely random nature of COVID. Even if we follow those three precautions of maintaining distance, covering face, and avoiding contact, and yet one do not know where does the infection come from. So that is another issue, which obviously it is in the domain of the medical scientist and the other people. But the hope is that I think there are a couple of couple of solution in the offering. One has already started in UK. I have a feeling it is said that there are already something has started in Russia and China, but we are also waiting for USA, which will survive, they say, with a low temperature as compared to the UK solution. So that is another area which I think you are going to study. All in all, I feel that this is an extremely important issue that you have taken for a discussion. I suppose some solution will come out. Some possibilities will come out, if not a direct solution. And that will take the form of prescription, suggestions to the government, to the policymaker. I can see the best people in the business are here who have worked on urban area and on the aspect that I have mentioned. So I wish you all the best, and we thank you. I can see other one or two people whom I know. Thank you very much, particularly all of them from outside and inside who have joined to the invitation of the Institute of Indian Institute of Economic and Social Change. Dr. Madheshwaran, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, and so thank you very much for your wonderful initial remarks. There are quite a lot of participants, not only the students and alumni and the faculty, there are quite a lot of participants from outside of ISAC also participating. It's the duty of the director to say a few words about our institute. Of course, most of you know that the Institute for Social Economic Change is founded in 1972. It was founded by none other than Professor V. K.R.V. Rao. He was envisaged this institute as a national center of excellence.
We have lost him.
Yeah, Satish, we have lost the director. There's a problem with his internet, I think. Satish? ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರ್ದು ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ. ಓಕೆ 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 ಓಕೆ
immediate pickup. Sorry, there is some technical lag from our ISAC side, it seems, and I'm very sorry for that. Of course, the Institute for Social Economic Change, basically we have been working on the understanding that the research alone is not enough, and equally important is to ensure that the findings of the research are disseminated among the stakeholders and for affecting changes in the society through policy. Towards this end, ISAC has showcased its research findings using various spaces and forums, and closely interacted with the policymakers at various levels. Why I'm giving an introduction about ISAC is some of the people whom they don't know about ISAC, some of the outside experts are sitting here. So as a duty of the director, that this is the brief introduction about our institute, and I come back to the today's subject and the welcome address. And Professor Kala, when she was discussing with me 1 month back, almost a month back, about cities and COVID-19, and which is a very important topic. And all of you know that cities are home to most of the world population and are centers of economic growth and innovation. However, the high concentration of people and activities in cities make them vulnerable to various stressors such as natural and man-made disaster. Understanding this, over the past decade, a vast body of research has been published on the impact of wide range of disaster on cities and necessary planning, recovery, and adaptation measures that need to be taken to deal with those disasters. However, while this is not the first time in the human history that pandemic affects cities, limited literature related to cities and pandemics existed before the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic. Urban research related to previous pandemics mainly focused on issues such as inequalities that make poor and marginalized groups more vulnerable to pandemics. The recent pandemic has brought to the fore the issue of urban vulnerability to pandemic and has resurrected interest in this topic. As various forces such as climate change and human encroachment into natural wildlife habitats may increase the frequency of pandemic in the future. Better knowledge of understanding patterns of dynamics of pandemics, their effects on cities, and necessary preparation, response, and adaptation measure is needed. In this regard, the recent pandemic affords an unprecedented opportunity to understand how cities might be affected by pandemics and what actions are needed to minimize the impacts and enhance urban pandemic resilience. So while saying this, when I looked at the thematic focus, by looking at the various research related to cities, I just have seen that there are 4 thematic focus, and on the impact of COVID-19 on cities is mainly related. The first one is environmental quality, second is socio-economic impact, third is management and governance, and the fourth is transportation and urban design. While this indicates a diverse research agenda, I hope this webinar provides some recommendation related to the socio-economic factors, as our chairman was pointing out, and urban management and governance, and transportation and urban design that can be used for post-COVID urban planning and design. Overall, existing knowledge shows that COVID-19 crisis entails an excellent opportunity for native action towards creating cities that are more just, resilient, and sustainable. So I hope this seminar will bring all those major themes, and maybe we may be lucky enough to hear the challenges, and as well as strategies, and as well as the kind of a recommendation from the experts whom they have gathered here. And on behalf of ISAC fraternity, I first welcome Professor Om Mathur, a non-resident fellow from the University of Toronto. Sir, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and participating to talk about COVID-19 and cities, and I warmly welcome you, sir. And second, I also welcome Professor George, Institute of Development Policy, University of Antwerp, Belgium. Amidst of his busy schedule, he has accepted and adjusted his time and so on and so forth. And thank you very much for joining us to give a wonderful talk on COVID-19 and cities. And Dr. Rana Hassan, of course, as I have mentioned in the beginning, of course, I know him when I was a small boy, when I was working at Berkeley Institute of Politics and Economics. I went to Hawaii. He was working at the East West Center. So after more than 2.5 decades, I'm seeing him in this COVID-19 has given an opportunity to see you after 2.5 decades through online. So thank you very much. Amidst of your busy schedule, you join us for this wonderful talk. And here is our the very senior bureaucrat of our state, Karnataka state, Dr. Vizal. He is a well-known urban policy maker. And of course, in our state, there are many urban planning and everything. And he is the brainchild behind many policy making. And he is very dynamic senior bureaucrat. He always is a very supportive and giving constant encouragement to ISAC in general, and also ISAC faculties in particular. And whenever we approach him, we don't feel that he is a bureaucrat. He's always, I consider him as an academician. I don't consider him as a bureaucrat in such a way, the way in which the kind of a research bent in his mind and to think of a better policy and the planning and the design. Sir, thank you very much for joining. I know that the government, I also worked for 5 years, how tough it is to join meeting and to spend time with us. And thank you very much. And on behalf of ISAC fraternity, I'm seeing that, the IIP director, Professor Mishra, sitting there, my friend, and Professor Abhay Pethe from University of Bombay is sitting there. There are many, this particular topic has attracted all the people throughout the country, it seems. But I could see Mishra ji and the Abhay Pethe ji there over there in the webinar. And on behalf of ISAC Board of Governors and on behalf of Chairman and my faculty and the students, once again I welcome all the speakers and the participants in the webinar. Thank you very much. I hand over to Professor Kailash Sridhar to moderate the session.
Thank you very much, Professor Madheshwaran, for those very nice words about our panel, and we're all truly humbled by your introduction. So what I would like to do is just, because you've already introduced the panel, I would like to kind of introduce them again, just with a little bit of the specifics. And what we will do is, the first gentleman in the panel to speak will be Professor George Mavrotas. George Mavrotas, as Professor Madheshwaran has already introduced, is a professor at the University of Antwerp in Belgium, although he is now based out of the Oxford, UK. And he's a very distinguished development economist, and whom I actually met at WIDER, the United Nations University's World Institute for Development Economics Research, and subsequently he was a chief economist at the Global Development Network, and following which he was actually also at IFPRI, the International Food Policy and Research Institute, and he was heading that office in Abuja, Nigeria. And most recently, I and George, we have co-edited a book on global urbanization, the Global South. So that is our Dr. George Mavrotas. And Dr. George Mavrotas will focus on the international perspective of how cities are affected by COVID-19. And followed by Dr. George Mavrotas, Dr. Rana Hassan will talk. Dr. Rana Hassan is the Director of Economic Research at the Asian Development Bank. He's a very senior officer at the ADB. And is Rana there? I don't see him. I hope that we have not lost him.
There might be technical lag. He will come back Don't worry.
Okay, I hope so. So Dr. Rana Hassan has a PhD in economics from the University of Maryland in College Park. And as Professor Madheshwaran rightly pointed out, he was a fellow at East-West Center in Honolulu, Hawaii also. And he has published his work in many high-impact journals such as World Development, Journal of Development Economics, Restat, a review of economics and statistics, and so forth. So we are really delighted to welcome him. And Dr. Rana Hassan will be followed by Professor O.P. Mathur. Professor O.P. Mathur is a well-known urban expert and he needs no formal introduction. But nonetheless, I want to highlight that he was a member of the Technical Review Committee for the Prime Minister, for the former Prime Minister on the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. And he was director of National Institute of Urban Affairs. And he held the HDFC chair in urban economics at NIPFP, where we worked on a lot of things together. And Professor Mathur and I, we have worked on a lot of things together. So I'm really delighted that he's here and he's going to talk about the finances of cities and how they have been impacted by COVID. And our Dr. Vishal R, I think Professor Madheshwaran introduced him rightly. He's almost an excellent friend of ISEC. He's a bureaucrat and a policymaker, but he's like a very good academic. He's an IAS officer, Indian Administrative Service Officer of the 2004 batch from Karnataka. And he's an MBBS doctor, medical doctor, which makes him very, very appropriate to talk about this. And he's also a zonal officer entrusted with management in one of the largest zones of Bengaluru for COVID. And he has also been secretary to the Chief Minister of Karnataka. So he's a very senior IAS officer, and we are delighted that he's here. So he will be talking about the challenges of COVID management in a large megacity like Bengaluru. So we have a very, very distinguished panel of economists, researchers, and also policymakers and those from multilateral institutions. I'm delighted to now invite Professor George Mavrotas to speak on the international perspective on how cities are impacted by COVID. George, kindly note you have 12 minutes because we have 5 panelists, so I hope this arrangement works without. Thanks a lot. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Kala. Good morning from Oxford, and thanks also to ISEC and the director of ISEC, and of course, Professor Kala, for the kind invitation. It's great for me to be part of this roundtable. So basically, in my presentation, I'm going to talk about international perspectives regarding the impact of the pandemic on the urbanization process. And of course, to argue that the pandemic crisis had enormous, I would say, consequences for the world community, certainly an understatement. I guess everyone agrees with me on this in this panel. And the pandemic has already, I would say, major impact on countries all over the world, and will have far-reaching implications for sure for the years to come, I'm afraid. And as usually happens, for those most vulnerable, the impact of the crisis is felt stronger. And by this, I mean, of course, many countries in the developing world, but also those vulnerable parts of the population, even in rich countries, as we have seen already. Indeed, I have to say the pandemic crisis hit the world with a complex shock, exerting simultaneous economic and social pressure and affecting in particular the most vulnerable in the society. But I would like also to stress here that many developing countries have entered the crisis with large vulnerabilities and a more limited fiscal space. So these combined together, I would say, undermine years of human development progress and may lead to what we may call in a few years from now a lost decade of development. Hopefully not. But I think the risks are certainly there. And of course, we cannot talk about the implications of the pandemic without talking about the overall nexus between the pandemic and urbanization all over the world, since with an estimated 90% of all reported COVID-19 cases, urban areas have become the epicenter of the pandemic, as we all know. The size of their populations and their high level of global and local interconnectivity make them particularly vulnerable to the spread of the virus. It's crucial also to remember that for many countries, the contribution of cities to national GDP is quite high. We're talking about a range between 70 to 80%. In countries, for example, such as Kenya, Tunisia, Botswana, and Uganda in Africa, to give some examples. Indeed, also the pandemic was severe and still is for cities all over the world. Estimates, quite recent estimates from the World Bank and the UN suggest that local governments may get 15% to 25% lower revenues in 21 next year, which is quite substantial change, as I'm sure you agree with me. And also cities with less diversified economic bases have been hit especially hard. Another area is related to tourism and cities that are very much dependent, I would say, on tourism. There we have some estimates which seem to suggest that we're talking about a decline of at the level of 80% by the end of this calendar year, accompanied by, of course, a loss of 120 million jobs, which is quite substantial for many countries, also in Europe, but also in the rest of the world, dependent, I would say, on tourism. But of course, the negative impact of the crisis on cities clearly goes also beyond the above. For example, in China's Hubei province, the response to the crisis in recent months resulted in a 600% increase in medical waste. I think is another area to look at this particular problem, I would say. The pandemic has also aggravated further deep-rooted inequalities in many countries, since where in a city person lives and works and a person's gender and, of course, age can lead to disproportional impact on groups that were already in a situation of greater vulnerability. So I think this is an area that requires further attention. And of course, we cannot talk about physical distancing and hygiene guidelines and the rest, which are of paramount importance, of course, in our fight against the pandemic, without access for everyone to adequate housing. I think this is an extremely important area to look at. In this regard, I have to say the global urban housing crisis forces around 1 billion people, around 24% of the world's urban population, to reside in slums and informal settlements. And of course, this exacerbates further the impact of the pandemic in those communities. At the same time, housing considerations may also be increasing the vulnerability of women to violence and abuse. According to recent data, since the pandemic began, levels of gender-based violence have increased at alarming levels, I have to say, in all regions in the world. And the current pandemic is also accelerating trends such as digitalization, shifts to remote work, and virtual delivery of essential services. But this unprecedented transition to digital life has also created an uncertain future for city infrastructure, for buildings in cities and the rest, as demand for office space and housing could subsequently, of course, decline. We have seen this impact already in many cities around the globe. So can we possibly argue against this background that this is the end now, or the beginning of the end of the urbanization process in the city, the way we understand the city so far? Some commentators, for example, have argued that we may see a pandemic-induced semi-permanent, so to speak, exodus from New York, a tech exodus from San Francisco, and a shift from London and Paris to the countryside. We have seen some trends like this in the last few months. Of course, it remains to be seen whether something like that is going to materialize in the months to come. But at the same time, I have to stress that, as we know, almost 80% of global GDP is generated in cities. And the relationship between urban density and job creation is very much positively correlated in major cities across the globe, from London to Mumbai, from New York to Jakarta. So it's really difficult to believe that we may end up in such a complete transformation of the urbanization process we have seen so far so quickly. But it's possible. My view is that the current presentation crisis is due to the pandemic may present at the same time to the international community a lifetime opportunity to build back better. I think it's extremely important to be optimistic here because it's a lifetime opportunity, as I said, to make things happen in view of the crisis. The history of the world can teach us that disruptions and unprecedented shocks can also bring about solidarity. We have seen that already in many countries all over the world, resilience, and the need for more partnerships at the same time. Therefore, it's a major opportunity for the world community to move and act together because the pandemic is a global problem and, of course, requires global action. In this context, it's really central to use the lessons emanating from the crisis so far in order to delve deeper into the whole urbanization process by building more resilient, inclusive, and at the same time, sustainable cities. On the sustainability issue, I would like also to stress that it's incredibly important to remember that the short-term environmental impacts that we have seen during the COVID-19 have demonstrated what is possible to achieve on the green transformation front if we take collective and decisive action. I think it's extremely important to maintain this particular progress in this area because it's very important for everyone. And to conclude, the pandemic is expected to fundamentally alter how cities are managed and governed in the future, including, of course, the role of local governments, the need to strengthen capacity of the local governments to respond to crisis and, of course, to help with the whole recovery process as part of the urbanization process in the world. And in this regard, of course, actions to be taken are very important since they will determine whether post-COVID cities will be developed and managed in a more sustainable manner. This calls obviously for a major transformative approach in designing the cities of the future, which clearly goes beyond existing mainstream paradigms of the urbanization process. This is a lifetime opportunity that we cannot afford to miss. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mavrotas, for that very precise presentation and keeping well within your time. Thanks a lot for that international perspective. And I will come back to the points that you made in your presentation, very well taken, later in my own presentation. Now I call upon Dr. Rana Hassan of the ADB to speak. Rana, over to you.
Kala, thank you very much. And if it's okay, I would like to share my slides. And I wonder if you can see these shares, the screen. This is a
Rana, I think I'm seeing this email from me to you. I think we are not seeing.
I see. Let me, my apologies. Let me stop sharing this. And now I'll share this one. Is that working?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Okay, and I'll just set it on full screen mode. So, Kala, thank you so much for inviting me. Not to take too much time, let me get straight to the heart of the matter. You had asked a number of questions and framed this discussion around these questions.
Oh, actually, okay. Yeah, that was my presentation, but you're I think it looks like we will overlap. That's fine, Rana.
I see. So, you had these very interesting questions about whether cities will continue to exist and the size distributions. And so let me just give you some perspectives, partly similar to George. I think there's a very long history of cities being hit by pandemics, and they have always bounced back. In fact, a number of scholars will say that they, in fact, bounced back even harder because pandemics, especially the terrible ones, they actually cause a reduction in the supply of workers, wages go up, it attracts more people in. And so I would have to say that my perspective here is that COVID is not going to be something permanent. It's been terrible, but in a year and a half, it will be gone. And that doesn't mean other pandemics will not come, but I think we need to we need to just recognize what history tells us. The second thing is cities are the locus of structural transformation. And the development is all about moving away from agriculture, increases in productivity, and those increases in productivity tend to be in services, in manufacturing, and those by their nature benefit from agglomeration economies. And you get agglomeration economies when people come together, i.e. cities. I don't think we can escape this, and that is just a fact of economics. Now, the death of distance, it has been predicted many, many times. It's being predicted since the days of Alvin Toffler. All we have seen pre-COVID is, in fact, New York City becomes even more attractive for finance, insurance, etc. Silicon Valley becomes even more and more of an innovation driver in digital technologies. We see this in Bengaluru. We see this in Gurgaon. So I think we have to recognize that agglomeration economies are such a powerful force. They are not going away. Work from home. A lot of people talk about work from home. The fact of the matter is work from home, it's very few people who can do it. We can do it. All of us are sitting here. The type of work that we do, it's possible. But for a large part of the labor force, they just cannot do it. So I don't think we can escape from the fact that we have to tackle pandemics and these types of problems. Now, what COVID does do is it emphasizes clearly the need to strengthen public health systems and social protection. It actually emphasizes further the importance of not only affordable housing, but adequate. When I say adequate, I mean a decent quality housing. It cannot be housing which is affordable, but complete squalor, lack of clean water, etc. So we need affordable, adequate housing. And we need safe, multimodal public transport. Cities ultimately run because of public transport. Now here, what we've been seeing in the pandemic is really that digital technologies and data analytics actually give us one handle on this problem. And we have a digital divide. And so the solution really is we have to accelerate the closing of this digital divide. We have to improve data analytics. There's a lot of apps being developed actually about how to improve public transport systems, just their timing and trying to tackle the problem of crowdings. We're seeing apps coming up all over the world, developed countries, developing countries. We see this happening in many parts of our region, Asia. And I think this part will accelerate. Finally, land use management. We've been talking about this a long time, and you are an expert on this, Kala. I don't want to belabor the point, but I think, again, we really see that we need to accelerate our the way we use land, and that land use management is critical. I'll just spend now a couple of minutes on some COVID-related things. This is a chart from Google's community mobility reports. And what it's showing us is just how much time people have been spending at home. I show this because this is based on 70 countries. And we've split the sample between developing countries and developed countries. The developing economies are shown in blue. The red are the developed. And what you see is that in this March-April period, there was a big increase in people staying at home. And this was happening everywhere, in all the cities around the world. But after April, mid-April, you start to see things coming down. Essentially, lockdowns started to be lifted. Economies simply could not tolerate more and more of these very strict lockdowns. Now, those lockdowns did help in COVID control, but the reality is that on the economic side, it just couldn't be managed. And I think we do have to recognize for future pandemics also that you can do lockdowns for a certain amount of time. After that, you have to move to better targeted things. Here's a chart on just how much people stay at home given a certain policy lockdown. And I want participants to just look at the more right side of this chart. And basically, this is capturing the level of stringency of lockdown. So 80 to 100 means you have very strict lockdowns. And what we notice is that for any given level of lockdown, the ability to stay at home is higher in developed economies. And again, they have smaller household sizes. It's easier to do lockdown. They're more able to do work from home, and therefore they're able to actually stay at home more. So once again, for developing country cities, I think we do have to recognize that lockdowns do work, but only for a certain amount of time. A third thing I want to show you is the importance of institutional innovations. And we've been doing some research on this, and I'd like to highlight the issue of paid sick leave. Now, you might think, what is this guy talking about paid sick leave in this forum on cities? This is actually quite important. What we know from COVID is that you have a lot of people who might be sick or who might be asymptomatic, but they're going to go report for work. And they're going to go report for work because they cannot afford to stay at home. They're going to have some fever, they will ignore it. They'll have a cough and they'll say, yeah, it must be something else. Let me go work, get my daily bread. We have been using a very sophisticated epidemiological model. And essentially what we did is we asked the question that if you could take 50% of your city's workforce and basically get them to stay at home, compensate them, let them stay at home if they develop COVID or COVID-like symptoms, what happens to the disease? We actually find a massive reduction in COVID cases and COVID mortality. And what it tells us is that you can't just look at paid sick leave as something like social protection, good to have. When you're talking about infectious diseases, it's actually very important to prevent this phenomena of contagious presenteeism. That is, I want to be marked present because if I'm not marked present at work, I will not get paid. So this is something we've done in the Philippines, and we're also doing it for Jakarta. And in fact, we have been working with the Philippines and Indonesian governments to look at how they could use their existing schemes and provide paid sick leave. And mind you, this is a lot less costly than trying to provide a wage subsidy to all the workers in a lockdown. It is much less costly. So we have a brief actually coming out talking about how this can be implemented, but let me just move on. Kala, can you just remind me how much more time I have?
Rana, I think you have maybe 3-4 minutes more.
Okay, so let me just now make a pitch for why cities are important and why we have to just continue to just design them better. We see from our analysis that big cities pay workers more. So these are the charts you see in blue. We have the big cities, and in orange we have the small cities. And mind you, this is also trying to control for age, education, gender. So even after controlling for those characteristics, a movement to a big city gives you more. And that is why people move to cities. And I think trying to stop that flow is, we all try to think there's too much congestion, but the reality is that's where the economic action is. We also find that big cities are really where a lot of innovation is taking place. We find that actually cities with big universities, high quality universities, are the ones where firms are more innovative. They're introducing process innovation, product innovation. So lots of good benefits from being in cities with good human capital accumulation. Now, this chart is basically just making the point, this does not mean we just need one giant city. No, we know that cities do get over congested, but that's where we need to introduce and make sure that housing is affordable. It's adequate. We need to ensure that transport starts moving towards public transport, multimodal transport. Now, certainly I'd like to just say that COVID does present a big challenge on transport. I think if anything else, it's really public transport, because at the end of the day, what is a city without transport? Nothing. I mean, if you don't have transport, you can't get from point A to point B, you can't meet, interact, goods can't flow. So I do think that one of the very important imperatives that we figure out, certainly even for now, but even for the future in being prepared, is really how to tackle this and future pandemics, future infectious diseases systems with ways to make public transport more safe. I had some charts on congestion and housing issues. I'm going to actually skip them. I just want to end on this point on land use planning. And I think ultimately, when we're worried about squalor and slums, etc., it's really a land management issue. At the end of the day, the affordable housing problem is a problem of supply. The supply side of land in our cities is so constrained that whatever you may do, it's going to be very difficult to provide affordable housing. Final point, and this is just to show how cities, and here I've just taken some of the states from the southern part of India. We see that these cities, big, small, medium, they're connected. And the connection is through these major highways and railroad systems. So cities are connected by flows of goods, services, and people. And ultimately, I think if we are going to try to avoid having these megapolises come up, we do need to make sure that intercity transport is fast, efficient, and cheap. So let me just end with that. And thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Rana Hassan, for that excellent presentation. And I will be touching upon the same question actually from a very, very similar perspective, but a slightly different angle. So we will wait and see what the synergies are before throwing it open to the audience. Now I'm delighted to invite Professor O.P. Mathur to speak on the preliminary impact that COVID-19 has had on city finances. This is still a very, very new phenomenon, and we are into this COVID only for about 8 months now. So it's not yet the end of the financial year, so we don't have any hard data yet. But I have my complete trust and faith in Professor Mathur's evidence regarding this. Over to you, Professor Mathur. 12 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kala. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be on this panel. I've been looking at the global literature on the impact of COVID-19 on local government finance. And I find two common, are you able to see me? Yeah. I'm able to see two common points coming out of the literature. One is that COVID has affected not just local government finance, but public finance for all the levels of government. In fact, the other levels of government are affected much more by COVID-19 than local government finance. It has also led to a major restructuring of expenditure portfolio of central government, of state government, and local government. This is one point that emerges from a very, very quick review of whatever is available on the sites. One. The second point that is coming out, George did give some estimate, but I think this estimate was more on the GDP account of COVID-19. But the local government finance contraction is estimated by the World Bank between 10 to 15%. There's only one paper of the World, it's really not the World Bank, but authors which have contributed a paper to the World Bank, which says that local government finance may have contracted by 10 to 15% of the total local revenue. Now, it raises both these points raise two questions. One is, what is the vulnerability of the revenue portfolio of local? How vulnerable are they to events such as COVID-19? One. And a subset of this question is, how about the property market? Whether property market, which gives roughly about 20-25% of the local government revenue, whether that has been affected adversely, and what is the effect of that on local government revenues? This is question number one. And the second question, which I think came out both from Rana as well as from your director, is, are there any revival or rescue strategies in place or under consideration of the government of India or of the state governments or of the local governments? Are there any, or it will just let it go and everything will take care of over time. Kala, I'm not able to see you.
Okay.
Kala, yeah,
I'm very much here.
Yeah,
I don't know
now
if
okay.
it is fine. We are able to hear you, Professor Mathur.
Oh, good, good. That is
You are
important.
able to hear us, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Okay. Now let me pick up these two questions. How vulnerable? Now, India is local. I'm using only for the urban part, not the panchayat part. It's a tiny sector in terms of physics. It's only 1% of the GDP. That is all the figure that we're talking about. Unlike about 4%, 5%, 6%, which are pretty common in the emerging economies, our local government local finance is just about 1% of the total GDP. And of the 1%, only about 0.5% really comes out of all sources of revenue, and the balance of 0.5 comes out of transfers, grants, dispensations, shared revenues between the local government and the state government, as well as the finance commissions. Then there's a third element in it, which is capital grant, which are nothing else but these centrally sponsored scheme grants that accrue to local government, which is really of a different nature, which are capital grants. Now, our best simulation is, and which is really very, very tentative, that of the main sources of revenues which are likely to be most affected are the transfer duties which are levied by municipal corporations in most states. And these transfer duties are nothing else but a surcharge on the stamp duty, and stamp duty being levied on property transactions. Now, our judgment or informed judgment is based on the fact that during this period, property transactions and the registration of property transactions is virtually zero because of the lockdown, because of the closure of the markets, property transactions, offices remaining closed, those transactions have not taken place, which is perhaps the biggest item on the municipal corporation revenue base, accounting for anywhere between 15 to 16% of all revenues in places such as Delhi. That has been very badly affected as a result of the virtually no property transaction. That's number one. The second component which has been affected are the license fees and the registration fee of small businesses who have to license themselves with the municipal corporations and the municipalities in order to operate within the city. And this is really the informal sector component, which run very, very small license for running a cart, for operating a cart, selling vegetables in the neighborhood markets. But license fees have been almost come to, or once again in a place like Delhi, just about 30% of the original figure. That is the best estimate that the municipal commissioner mentioned to me a few days back. Two. Number three is the advertisement tax. No advertisement during this period, virtually none, zero advertisement. Now one can say that, well, advertisement taxes are really not that important in terms of local government revenue, but they do account for roughly about 3 to 4% of the own source revenue, and therefore it becomes an important one. Now on property taxes, the issues are somewhat mixed, in the sense that several of the municipalities have deferred the collection of property tax, not cancelled them, not reduced them, but simply deferred payment of property taxes by another 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. And when we get their account for 2021, then we will know whether the deferred payments remain deferred until the end of the financial year, or whether they were paid by the house owners during this period. That is point number one on property taxation. The second point is that really answers the subject question, property market as a whole. Now, property market as a whole has been very muted during this period, very, very muted during this period. And there is speculation that this may have led to, because the market was not functioning, may have led to some shortages of the higher prices for some of the low-income housing and so on and so forth, but we just don't have any kind of data available on this part. So this is the own source component of the local government finance, and the critical part is that unlike the state government and unlike the central government, local fiscal deficit is not an option for local governments, because the statutes do not permit local bodies to post the deficit on revenue account. The statutes do not permit that. So they can't really go in for deficit financing or the local fiscal deficits as the state government or the central government do. When we come to the other component, 0.5, which is really the transfers, which are grants, which are shared revenues, which are finance commission grants, the tricky part here is that unlike the other transfers between the center and the state, the transfer from the state government to local bodies are more or less obligatory obligations in many ways, because they meet the salary components of local government, so they are more or less given that those funds will definitely flow irrespective of what the circumstances may be. Maybe there may be some defaults, like in the case of Delhi, once again we are noticing, but transfers being of that variety that there is nothing like a divisible pool which exists at the central level and which is shared with the state government. In the case of local bodies, such divisible pools do not exist. But what exists really is the obligatory payments to local bodies, and I think that remains untouched by it. There's a second part. As far as the capital grant is concerned, what our information from the ministry is that when it comes to housing for all, now it is serving a dual purpose. It is serving that this is a centrally sponsored scheme for local governments, but the second component of housing is that it is also a growth escalator for the economy as a whole. And therefore the grant or the amount that has been kept under Housing for All is not being disturbed. In fact, there might be a slight enhancement of the total grant which is available to local bodies under Housing for All. But when it comes to smart cities and Amrit, there's a possibility that the grant at the end of the year may decline from what it was in the previous year. But that is the likely impact of all this. Let me come to the second question, which is really whether there has been any revival strategy, whether there has been any rescue strategy. Now, what is interesting is that local government finance, barring the centrally sponsored scheme and the Finance Commission, was of no interest to the central government, no interest to the local government. What has happened is that as a result of the crisis, the RBI, for the first time, has included in its 2020-2021 report on state finances a separate section on the third tier financing, which is a very, very healthy change, which had been, one of the points that we have been raising for a very long time. That RBI, when it looks at the central finances, it looks at the state finances. Why would it not look at the third tier accrual? And fortunately, as a result of COVID-19, it has engaged their attention, and there's a full section on the tier saying how it has been operating, how it has been behaving over it. But we will know the results only towards perhaps in the next report of the RBI. Local governments have also been, to some extent, a part of the economic stimulus. And that also shows that in some way or the other, central government has also been, but not the tier as such, but a section of the tier, which is really the informal sector for which some capital support has been announced under the economic stimulus announced by the finance minister. And the Finance Commission has come out with in the 2020-21 report, it has come out with an excellent suggestion with respect to how to strengthen local government finance, also by assigning part of the revenues for urgent matters such as pollution. They received a massive grant from the 15th Finance Commission for this year, And hopefully that will continue, because that is not a one-year phenomenon. That will continue. Supplemental grant for all metro cities with population of 1 million, excepting those in Kerala, because they don't really have the problem of pollution. Also, the Finance Commission has come out with some kind of an incentive for getting Finance Commission grant by saying that local governments must keep the property taxation afloat with the GDP growth rates in order to become eligible for Finance Commission grant. So some kind of incentive is being given by the Finance Commission for local governments to improve their property taxation. The final point, Kala, and that really arises, when Rana was giving some examples of the work from home and so on and so forth. The New York Times of the day before has a very interesting story, which is exactly on the subject that we are discussing, that how the rentals in New York City are extremely high, and therefore the condition is very high and so on and so forth. But what work from home has done is that it has enabled the tenants to move out of New York and go to those locations where rents are low, and to be able to operate from those low rent locations, at least for the next 6 months or so. That is what the company have said. So one effect of this work from home is that the high rents in New York City are leading to some kind of an out migration to those locations which are low rent. It also carried a very interesting story about the Lower Manhattan, which, as we know, is a very commercial and a very high rent area, where commercial properties that are closed, they are being converted into tenements, small tenements, for people to stay on, in order that the finances of the corporation, the New York corporation, does not necessarily suffer. So all kinds of innovations are coming into the market in order to ensure that the damage to the local government finance is minimized by some of these actions. We will really have to wait until April of next year in order to see what the effect of COVID-19 has been on their finances. And I think I would urge Kala to begin to think in terms of the April or May, by which time we will have a clearer notion of how COVID-19 affects local government finance, and I think that would be a very educational exercise. Thank you very much, Kala. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mathur. I think that was indeed a very, very thoughtful presentation on how COVID is likely to affect the finances of our cities. I completely agree with you on the deferment of the property tax, and also the trade license fee, and people going away to cheaper locations to work from home and so forth. But thank you very much, and we will revisit this. Thanks a lot. Now we move over to the policy making point, Dr. Vishal, and he has this unique perspective of the medical profession that he came from, along with the challenges that he's been battling with at the forefront of this war against COVID in Bengaluru. Over to you, Dr. Vishal. Looking forward. Thanks. You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, I've unmuted myself. My PPT will go online. I hope it's clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you kindly PPT large model?
I'm not yet able to
Professor, see. Is it possible? Have you been?
I think I've just
seen, please.
I see that it says Dr. Vishalar has started screen sharing. That's
you have
all
to
I'm
start
able to
sharing. Sir, start sharing.
We have started sharing. We've started resume sharing my video. Resume sharing. Resume share. Mail. Okay. Anyway, it will start. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. I also head the Rural Drinking Water and Sanitation Department, Government of Karnataka. We do two main schemes. About 40 million people, we serve water in the rural areas, which became very critical for us during COVID. The second thing is I'm the mission director Karnataka for the Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin. Professor Hassan was talking about the biomedical waste. I think Professor George was talking about biomedical waste, where about 600% there was an increase. So that became a very big challenge for us in the rural areas also. So along with the normal urban issue, the rural areas got integrated a lot, especially in a place like Bengaluru. First slide, please. Okay, Bengaluru has a population of about 1.5 crores. That's about 15 million. I looked after 10% of that population. That is Bangalore RR Nagar zone, which is an urban area, and a peri-urban area called Bangalore South, which includes about 7 taluks. We had about 33,000 cases, 560 deaths. Deaths we are sure about, cases I'm not so sure about. Possibly it's 2 or 3 times this number. The next thing is, how do you cover through your medical infrastructure? Because they are on the front of your service delivery. We have 12 PHCs, urban primary health centers. These PHCs range from people between 70,000 to 1.5 lakh per PHC being covered. 7 rural PHCs ranging from about 20,000 to about 35,000 per PHC. Next slide, please. Now, this is interesting. What I'm showing to you is that today's...
Sir, we are not able to see your slides. I don't know if the others are able to see.
No.
Are the others able to see?
No,
No,
right.
Yeah.
I also cannot see.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. It's okay.
This is why,
You can...
this is why I had particularly last time same thing happened. Resume share. Resume. Last time same thing happened and it gets into a twist.
Okay, do you want me to try?
Yeah, if you have it, kindly
try this. Yeah, I'll just try this. I'm not sure. I hope it works. It's yeah, I hope it works. It's just downloading. You can continue to speak, sir. While
okay, fine. The next thing which happened over here is when we had just about as of now, we have 14 ambulances, 2 hearse vans and 2 in reserve. At a particular time, about 4 months back, we had 54 vehicles like that. When we take decisions on ground, we used to take decisions on ground. What is the ambulance turnover time? The ambulance turnover time would be roughly 2 to 4 hours per patient. So any ambulance used to do about 4 to 6 patients uptake every day. Slowly,
so everybody is able to see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Put it in slideshow, madam. Put it in slideshow.
Slideshow.
So this is what happens. What made a difference in this is very, very intensive testing. Can I go to the next slide, madam? Next slide, please. Here, go to the previous slide, just the previous slide, madam. This is a very interesting thing for us. The hearse vans. I have 3 crematoria under my control. And we found that when we started burning the bodies, cremating the bodies, we actually ended up doing it till 1:32 in the late night. So the crematoria were reaching their load and we were in a complete crisis. The more and more efforts you need to put in during these acute times, it falls short. So we actually look at 3 things when we are doing this. First is the manpower. Second is the equipment. Third is the process and procedures which we follow. We mapped this out looking at turnover times. Next slide, madam. When we saw this, we realized patients were going to 3 main places. Many of them were isolating at home. Initial directions of the MHA was don't isolate at home. Take everybody possible to a COVID care center or a hospital. Then we realized the more we keep people in a residence and ensure they are redressed properly, to that extent, our load goes down. I have 2 COVID care centers working under me. In fact, Bangalore had the biggest COVID care center of almost 10,000 beds. I had about 800 beds running under my jurisdiction, out of which peak was 785 people. People who were admitted in the COVID care centers were the persons who were mildly asymptomatic or asymptomatic, COVID positive, who could not afford to stay in an isolated place in their house. They did not have the facilities. This became critical for us to break the infection chain. So we were able to move people and keep them under support. They were there for 14 days with full amount of care. The other thing which happens over here is, initially when you diagnose a person at COVID positive, they go into a complete panic attack. Their family members, neighbors, everybody. So whether they are all right or not, they feel they have to get hospitalized. The moment they go to the hospital, they stabilize. Then they find everybody is in the same boat, and then they say, no, we would like to go out. We would like to go back. So when this started happening for us, we had two options: either move them back home or take them to the COVID care center. If we are taking them back home, the neighbors started a hangama. They said no. They started treating these people as untouchables almost. So then we had to again work backwards on that and push people and say, no, they have the facility, so we will push people. Because of the psychological thing, we realize that unless we are in a better position to do more testing and make the testing acceptable, it is going to be a challenge. Very, very great shortage of RT-PCR. RT-PCR has high specificity, and if you do something called the CT, the cycle threshold, if your cycle threshold is above 40, you get more sensitivity. If your cycle threshold is 35, you get less sensitivity. That's what happened when people moved from India to Hong Kong. India result is negative, Hong Kong result is positive, because Hong Kong was doing 40 cycle threshold. We are accepted ICMR at 35 threshold. So many people, when we started doing with RT-PCR, we did not have so many kits. But when we did the RAT kits is high specificity, very, very low sensitivity, hardly 30%. So unless that person is an acute viral load, you don't catch. When we started doing more and more tests, we started not getting many patients, but the patient would transmit it to others. So slowly, if you see, go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. You can see we have now ramped up to that extent. No, previous slide, please. Previous slide. Only 10%, even though I have been given a direction that you can do 30% RAT and 70%, 90% of my tests are RT-PCR. But the cost of the RT-PCR test is expensive. So we do the pooled method. That is, we take 5 swabs, nasopharyngeal swabs, put it in. If anything is positive, then you isolate and do it. Otherwise, every RT-PCR test we started at 4,000 rupees is now down to 800 to 1,200. But the number of tests which we are doing now is 10 times more. Bangalore does about 50,000 tests a day. My target is actually about 4,000. I do minimum 4,500. I do not aim for anything less than 4,100. By this, as I take you ahead, our specificity ratio or sensitivity ratio or patient positive has come down very significantly. Next slide, please. Now, how do you do this? These are my 12 PHCs, 14 wards. In the brackets in the first column is my target. I analyze every day, target-wise, each PHC, whether they have reached their target. You can see Kengeri Upanagara has generally reached. Look at the 4th row, Malathalli. Malathalli is my biggest one. It has never reached. Now the question comes, why it has not reached? Many times we found it is not reached because if you keep on going to the same apartment complex again and again, many times they will assault you. We sent some of our people to a place where the snake charmers were living. They left a snake there on them. So many times our forward workers, our link workers, our corona warriors, when they went, the local resistance to that is extremely high, extremely high. So then we had to issue orders on the Epidemic Act, under the Disaster Management Act, saying we will take action against you. So they will tell you, today you go, they'll say, no, tomorrow you come, we'll keep ready. Next day you go, everybody's on mass leave. So you have to have very surprise checks. By doing this in a very, very systematic manner, as of today, out of 4196, which is the urban target, we are doing almost about 85 to 90% on that. Next slide, please. In the rural 7 PHCs, we are also doing almost the same. So together, even compared to the targets given to us, we are doing 110, 120%. But to the target I have internally set for myself, which is about 5,000 plus, I am doing about 80, 90%. Next slide, please. The question comes is, how do you say, it's a great idea, Malathalli at 548, 191 is Jalahalli. How do you do it? Then I go swab collector wise. If you really want to go detail, go person wise. Initially, for us to do 500 people, 1,000 people testing was very challenging because we did not have swab collectors. We had to train swab collectors. The question, how do you train them? We tell them, when you put the swab into the nasopharynx, does he tear up? If he tears up, that means your swab is more effective. These were the words we said. Then we started doing. Fortunately for us, we did not have any adverse reaction. It can lead to hypervagal reaction. So vagal reactions we did not have, but there is pain. There is soreness for quite a few days. we had certain expert swab collectors who could do 300. Our target was 60 to 80 per them per day per swab collector, because wearing a PPE and sitting for 4 to 6 hours is extremely challenging. But some of them were doing 300. They were so much expert. They will go to a railway station, patient comes, tuck, 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 tuck. So that was something which actually gave us the numbers and we were doing. Next slide, please. What did this result in? This resulted in a 0.69% positivity rate. Now, why does a positivity go down? 3 reasons. First, the incidence of the disease has gone down along with the prevalence. Second, you are doing it wrongly. 3, your testing apparatus is not very good. Your lab is not very good. Then we had the quality check for all this. We sent independent people to check on that. We were actually having expert people who over the months had developed that skill. Second, we ensured that the way they take that cold chain up to the lab is proper. Third, the actual lab testing was done well. So when we have ruled out the 3, as Sherlock Holmes says, when you have ruled out everything else, whatever remains is the answer. In better words, he said that. That was the answer. The actual prevalence, the severity has come down. It's 0.69%. But again, you can see it ranges from 0.3 at Matikere to about 1.11%, 1.61% at Kengeri. So depending on a geographical area. Next slide, please. This is again in rural areas. This is very interesting. In the rural areas at certain places, they were able to isolate themselves better. And the rural areas are, according to me, much better governed in Karnataka because your link workers are very good. Your Anganwadi workers, Asha workers are very good. So we were able to catch. So the positivity ratio is much better and lot of spacing other than in Bangalore where there is slum and everything. Next slide, please. This is how you see, we do something called the primary contact and the secondary contact. Primary contact, I am positive, immediate contact to me. Secondary, who has again come in contact with my primary contacts. So we targeted first primary contacts followed by secondary. We have done it everything. You can see we reached a maximum of 10.85. For every 1 positive patient, we catch all the relatives, whoever they have been in close in contact and others. So in this manner, we reach even today, because the patient numbers have come down, it has gone to 10.14. Otherwise, it was a very great challenge following up on these contacts, primary and secondary contacts. Now, the other thing we do is, interestingly, we do say I'm positive, I'm swabbed, it is decided. Say my wife is swabbed today, repeated after 4 days, because we want to ensure that the person becomes positive or not later. So this is the other methodology we have adopted. Next slide, please. Now, nil contacts. What is nil contact? Somebody is positive, we are not able to catch them. % of 0 contacts. Is it so? Actually, what I am showing you today is with a lag of 1 day. This 102 will come down to 20 or 30. Why it will come down to 20 or 30 is some of them have gone to the adjacent zone. Actually, untraceable will be very less. The system has been honed so well now, we are able to catch almost all our patients. Our failure rate per day may be 1 or 2%, but generally we catch all of them because the system has been honed very well. Next slide, please. Similarly, this is in the Bangalore rural, 5.88 is the contact per person. Next slide, please. This is the nil contact traced. Hardly anybody we miss. Bangalore, as I said, rural areas are much better. We are able to catch them much better now. Next slide, please. Now, home isolation. When we encourage people to isolate at home. Initially, the thing was, what about cross-infection? So we had a call center and our in-house asking, do you have sufficient rooms? Do you have toilets? Is anybody else symptomatic? Are any pregnant women there? Is there anybody with higher age group? So that focus came. And that cycle we closed. We test a patient, we trace a patient, we test a patient, we isolate him either home or COVID care center or hospital, and we treat him. Treatment was only 4 important things. Simple paracetamol with azithromycin. Give vitamin C with zinc and vitamin D. 3, even though WHO says, I strongly believe, many doctors in India believe, remdesivir, steroids given early actually give you results. If it reduces the severity of a disease, it prevents complications from happening, and it ensures that your lung involvement becomes less. I have a lot of doctor friends who tell me, sir, please check out, many of them are coming with stroke. So we add low dose aspirin, 75 mg. So if you put this is a vasculitic condition. So you put these four. So what I did is I made a small kit. You give them these tablets. Give paracetamol, give azithromycin. Azithromycin is a 400 mg safe drug, one tablet a day for 5 days. Don't give steroids. Keep following them. If necessary, move them for remdesivir and steroid treatment. It actually helps. Last thing is low dose aspirin. Unless there is a bleeding diathesis, you give low dose aspirin. By this, we were able to pull in a lot more patients into safety easily. We bought and gave them thermometers and pulse oximeters in advance. So they themselves will monitor and tell us if there is anything. So by this, we multiplied our outreach by multifold. Next slide, please. Now, home isolation, 90%. Every day a call goes to these people and we ask them, are you okay? Is anybody having symptoms? What is the thing you want? Etc. And for every one of them, the lower socioeconomic status, we had a food kit being given. Now, once I gave the food kit, they took it. They recovered. Many well-to-do people refused. They said, no, we are okay. What we are doing now, we are following up with these poor people, the socioeconomic status, and giving them a second kit and telling them, are you okay these days? Are you doing this? This is to ensure we find that they are still okay, because many of them not got back their economic activity. As one of the eminent speakers was just talking to us about that. How do we take care of the urban poor? This was an extra step from our side. Next slide, please. This is the tele-triage. We started doing many times when the cases were exploding. We started doing it through a certain checklist, through a tele-triage, and it actually gave us results. Next slide, please. Now, whenever you have a system and you want to achieve things, you require two things: competent people, sufficient people. I ran out of them very fast because many of them fell ill. I lost 3 of my officers, including my second in command. He died. He died within 15 days to 1 month of his retirement with COVID positivity. So we had people actually collapsing. They go, they do, they fall down. And once that critical fellow falls down, I did not have a buffer. So people have worked beyond their ability in the acute phase. Now we are much better. But during the initial phase, for the first 2-3 months, it was, as they say, extremely challenging. Now we are doing it in a much more better manner, but the challenges are still there, because for Bengaluru, they have predicted that we may have a second wave starting from the 15th of January, that is second week of January. That is why we are not ramping down on the testing at all. Next slide, please. Crematoria. This is nothing. These were the deaths. We are dedicated to dedicated crematoria. We were running out of space, and one crematoria stopped. Once a crematoria stops, you have a lot of difficulty managing the relatives, managing others. How do you do it? This was there. So people had to convince. And the thing is, during this time, no doctor wants to sign a death certificate, because if it is an unnatural death due to something, you end up with one more challenge. If I'm running out of time, madam, this is important. That's why I'll just take a couple of minutes more. So that is why we were pushing the people, and we simplified the death declaration rules. This helped us ensure crematoria runs much better. Next slide, please. The containment zone. Government of India, I did not agree with them. They said, one person is positive, my house is positive, 10 houses on this side, 10 houses on that side, close the thing. How much of a stigma to that area? How much insensitive to people? We are treating people. We are stigmatizing them by doing this. So I told my people, don't worry about Government of India, blame it on me. You will only close down that house, provided the COVID care patient is there. Otherwise, you will not do anything. Ensure he gets its kits and tell the local persons that he has to have an eye on that. By this, lot of misery for the person staying, even you and me, have to be handled in a proper manner. Just stigmatizing that layout, people will simply look at it in a very bad manner. So we quietly disregarded the Government of India in certain things, but put this system in place and handle these people a little more humanly. Next slide. This is the thing. Now, masks. We realized as thing happens, mask. We have given a target to various people. Our marshals are there to put mask fine. People are disregarding. If you do not give them the proper enforcement, they will never listen. So our mask enforcement has gone up. It's roughly, as you can see, it's increased day on day. We are at about 102. I intend to do about 130 to 150 a day, because people are still violating. Until this message goes into the system, we will face a second wave, and again, it will be difficult for the rest. Next slide, please. This is where I said, still we have food kits. We are following with the food kits and ensuring that we follow up on the lower socio-economic status to achieve things. Next slide, please. Now, manpower. Whenever you're tackling a magnitude thing of this magnitude, look at your manpower, your equipment, and the process. You should not go down in the process. You have to look at each and everything and do. Keep on reviewing things and doing tweaks. You have to have the private sector working with you. We took over the beds. We did the testing. We took them as our partners. We listened to them. 51 hospitals are in my jurisdiction. We required ICUs. I had a friend of mine. So we pushed ICUs, and every one of our patients, whomever we could, we ensured they got ICUs. There was a shortage, but we ensured and we started pushing ICUs. But what we lost in many of this is the opportunity cost of our manpower, the financial cost of testing, the financial cost of resources. I think the bill must have come to about 1,500 crores and rising now. The communication, you have to keep communicating to people. We are with you, do not worry. Night 1:30, I used to get a call for an ambulance. I used to get a call in the morning 5:30. So that acute phase is through hell. You have to ensure people get the communication. Put a system. I had put 6 doctors in my wards, in my control room, saying, you have a problem, it is my assurance I'll get you a bed. It is my assurance you'll get a ICU. But call this number. Don't disturb people. Call this number. We ensured each and every person got a bed like this. Then we have started preparing for vaccination. Fortunately, my wife, my better half, is also part of the thing. I can understand. I've told her, I've told the authorities that please ensure that the rollout will be much bigger than what you're envisaging. So you really should look at doing big bang. You do small bang, you will try to do great things like data entry, but once the numbers become more, you can't. So they need to do a better method of doing it. Biomedical waste is one more challenge. Paid sick leave, very relevant. I totally agree. In fact, Government of Karnataka declared the 14-day special casual leave. So we have ensured that in Labour Department, certain declaration has gone. Fiscal space. Karnataka has rolled out the One Nation, One Ration card. If you look at the own tax to the GSTP ratio, we are the highest in the country. So our fiscal space this time, we are borrowing maximum in order to utilize this for transfers, intrastate transfers. The laborers going back. One other challenge that we had was I was personally responsible for Orissa and Chhattisgarh to send. I sent 10,000 people back during the epidemic as per the Supreme Court orders. Bihar and UP sent 1 lakh people back. So we have sent, I think, if I'm not wrong, 300 to 400 special trains. Day in, day out, we were doing. Many of the people, officers who were part of this, they all ended up with COVID positive, including yours truly. So it becomes very, very difficult when we go through this. Finally, using Central Finance Commission, State Finance Commission, we have doubted whatever resources possible in order to ensure we deliver services. This is a time when all the chips are down, government has to rise. Government of Karnataka has been very supportive in that, whether it's the political class. We have had accusations of this, that, etc. That will always be there. But officers from the chief secretary downwards to many of my revenue inspectors, they work very, very well. In fact, I'm working with Professor Kala on a paper to actually do the analysis of how do we do it much better in future if certain things come up. Lastly, whether we can waive off taxes, local taxes, property taxes, I doubt, because we need to see how we can make our municipal bodies a lot more sustainable on their own, because if they keep looking at the state itself, it's going to be extremely tough, because our fiscal space in the state has also got immensely reduced after the borrowings that we have undertaken. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Vishal, for that very enlightening presentation about how in one of the unprecedented occasions, government has really risen to the occasion. Although I certainly agree that contact tracing maybe is one of the most important challenges of managing this pandemic in the context of a large metropolitan area. Thanks a lot. So what I will do now is I will stop sharing this and I will actually make a short presentation. And I wanted ideally to have one of my distinguished co-panelists to have the last word, but because I was moderating, I thought I'll just put the donkey at the last. So I will share my screen now. Are you able to see me? See my screen now? Yes?
No, not it.
Not yet. Huh? Okay.
Yeah, start sharing.
Yeah, okay. Okay, is this visible now?
Yes. Yeah. Slideshow.
Okay.
Put it in slideshow.
Right. I have put it in slideshow. It takes a bit of time, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So what I'll do is, as Dr. Rana Hassan basically talked about, I think I will confine myself because we have very little time. I will just confine myself to 3 questions that have been raised by my previous panelists. Professor Mavrutas talked about this in the context of New York City. And I think Dr. Rana Hassan also talked about this. So I'll just talk about just 3 very fundamental questions for policymakers to address here as to whether or not cities will continue to exist and what will happen to the size distribution of cities, because people are exiting large cities like New York City, and here in Mumbai and Bengaluru, they're going back to their own small towns. As long as you have an internet connection, you just go there and work from there. And this has actually raised a lot of concerns about the economic stimulus of cities, especially contributing to macroeconomic growth in a deep recession like this. And I want to just ask a few questions about density. And I think this is something that's well known. I want to just point out with this slide that there is a very steeply positive relationship between urbanization and economic growth. When we take countries of the world, very few countries of the world have reached a per capita income of at least $10,000 without reaching 60%, 60% urban, although different countries at different stages of urbanization have been able to benefit actually a little bit more. I should say India is in this club, which has actually benefited a lot more from urbanization at 33%. If we look at Indonesia, if you look at China, when they were all at 33% urban, their per capita income was a lot lower than the $2,000 that India is having now. So that is one thing that I want to point out. So I think Dr. Rana hasn't talked about this, but this is the informal workforce in countries of the world. As long as we continue to have the informal workforce, cities will continue to exist because of the need to access jobs, because of the need for mobility, transport, and for the need to be physically present in one place, like construction workers, drivers, nannies, maids, and our solid waste workers, and so forth. So here, if we look at the bottom panel, the top panel shows the percentage of informal workforce in cities, selected cities of Africa. Here down, you will see Asia and Pacific, the share of informal workforce in cities like Ahmedabad, Kolkata, Mumbai, Delhi is well over 80%, right? So there is no way cities in Asia and Pacific, Africa will actually cease to exist, right? As long as we continue to have a large informal workforce. Now, this is something that Rana also talked about. Why is it difficult to work from home in India, right? This is a chart of the internet penetration in India. You will see that Delhi is the only endowed city where only about 70% of folks have internet penetration. Compare this to Karnataka at only 39%, and all India is only 36%. And I can't imagine how our work from home policies will work in Bihar, Jharkhand, and Odisha, where the internet penetration is so low. So the answer based on the relationship between urbanization and economic growth, our informal workforce proportion, and also work from home, the internet penetration, is that cities will continue to exist. So what will happen to the size distribution of cities? I did a few regressions. I mean, these are ordinary least square regressions, and basically, I mean, these are not corrected for endogeneity or anything like that, but to the urban professionals here, I will share one shocking thing, right? Which is that this regression is based on data on COVID cases at the district level. It's not the city level, right? Districts are larger administrative, much larger administrative units than cities. And what this regression basically shows is that economic activity basically leads to COVID prevalence. COVID prevalence per 10,000 population of the district is basically the dependent variable here. And this is what we would like to understand. The urbanization rate has a very high and statistically significant impact on COVID prevalence. So does population density, right? Population density also has a very high and statistically significant effect. So now, what does this mean? So I want to mention that there is when you look at the level of the Indian states, there is a positive relation of definitely 0.43 between urbanization COVID prevalence. What happens to the relationship between urban primacy and COVID prevalence? Urban primacy refers to the proportion of urban population that is concentrated in a single city. And you will find that states like Telangana, which are characterized by very steep urban primacy, basically are also the states with some of the highest COVID prevalence rates. Telangana, Maharashtra, and so forth. So no doubt we also find a positive correlation between urban primacy and COVID prevalence. Okay, so now having said this, primate cities are also the highly congested ones, right, as per research. So you would expect them to be characterized by COVID prevalence, also high COVID prevalence. Now, what is the distribution, international evidence regarding migration and city sizes? Actually, in Spain, what was found was that there was, during the pandemic, there was a movement of people away from Madrid to the coastal towns was observed. That is one thing that I wanted to say. So maybe primacy reduced in the size distribution changed temporarily, probably in Spain. And in China, for example, this is not necessarily in the context of the pandemic, but the share of migrants alone accounts for more than 40% of the city size inequality premium. This is evidence from China. And migration as a result of the pandemic definitely depends on urban healthcare. In the United States, when you look at the 1918 Spanish flu, it started in Philadelphia, and smaller cities, it was observed, had a higher mortality burden. And now I want to show you some evidence from India on what happened to the size distribution of cities during the Spanish flu. See, the Spanish flu was 1918. And we have, this is all data from the Census of India, 1911, 1921, 1931. See, look at the proportion that class 1 cities accounted for in the city size distribution, 1.36% in 1911. 1921, it was 1.42%. That was 3 years after the Spanish flu. And 1931, about 13 years after the Spanish flu, it was 1.4% still. So I still think that the city size distribution is a very, very long run phenomenon governed by what we all know as Zipf's law. So I don't think this pandemic will have any significant effect on the city size distribution of cities, at least in this country. So now what about density? So this is just a simple table at the state level. We find that there is a positive correlation, no doubt, between slum households and COVID prevalence at the state level. And this is very understandable because slum households are all very, very dense and you don't have open spaces. And now this is the open space, right? So this is the prevalence of parks per 100,000 population, and this rises like this, right? This is Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, and so forth. And wherever the incidence of parks is low, the incidence of COVID is high. So as we see an increasing thing here, there is a decreasing thing here. And we no doubt found a negative correlation, which was significant between parks, open spaces, and COVID prevalence. So now this is my last slide. So what are the basic lessons? So I chose very, very select important questions for us to answer, and what are the policy directions. And cities continue to be important. And one, we have to manage markets better, fruit, vegetable markets better, unlike what happened in Wuhan. One. Two, just as shocking it was that we found data based on district level, based on which the regressions were estimated. We need to have data on COVID prevalence and disease and incidence and healthcare infrastructure at the city level. And I don't think the city size distribution will really change. And we need to, what are the implications of increased densification implied by some of the land use regulations and management? One is that we certainly have to increase parks and open spaces. We can certainly increase the density, but this is, we can increase density slowly, but this is not an excuse for not increasing infrastructure where a projected increase in population density is seen. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm really sorry if we have taken much longer than we had anticipated for the panelist presentations. Now I would like to open this up for discussion to all the audience while thanking them for their patient listening. So while the audience is thinking, what I would like to do is just go to the chat box here, and there are some questions and challenges by Professor Abhay Pete. Let me read them out. Would the panelists agree that lack of decentralization, lack of a comprehensive database, lack of affordable and acceptable housing are important and hence to be dealt with going forward? And Professor Pete, should I just also read the other questions by you? Would the panelists agree that lack of decentralization, lack of a comprehensive database, lack of affordable and acceptable housing are important? Okay, that's the same thing and have to be dealt with going forward. Our definition of urban seriously has a downward bias. Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Pete, for these questions, because I would like to just take this last one because I just published a paper in Area Development Policy, Taylor Francis Journal, based on this, and I actually I could not agree with you more, actually. And I find that even as of 2011, more than 65% of India were to be urban today. If we were to really look at relaxing one of the criteria for the definition of what is urban, which is 5,000 persons population, 400% population density, and 75% male main non-agricultural employment. So I completely agree with you, Professor Pete, and I thank you a lot for this question. And I would like to pose these questions to the other panelists. So if you want, should we go in the same order or we can go in the reverse order also? Dr. Vishal, I think he's, I don't know if he's talking. Professor George Mavruchas, do you want to take this two questions from Professor Pete? You're able to see them, or should I read them out to you again? Or
can you read it out, madam, please, if you don't mind?
Okay. I read it once. Would the panelists agree that lack of decentralization, devolution for empowerment, lack of a comprehensive database, and lack of affordable and acceptable housing are important and hence to be dealt with going forward?
There are three different questions in one. It's actually that. Decentralization basically meaning the three-tier system, the municipalities being stronger. Yes, definitely. I would not say lack, because in any structure that we see, in such cases, the federal government has to kick in. Here, the union government had to kick in on various things because the guideline, the state government had to borrow and give us a lot more resources. Comprehensive database would be what? The database regarding the manpower, the equipment, what? Or is it the people? See, ultimately privacy data, it became very, very critical for us that we had to keep the private, the data of many of these patients private. So comprehensive database of our infrastructure where we can tackle, yes, it does help. Now, acceptable housing, obviously, if you are able to give some of them space to stay separately or more isolated, you are able to restrict the exposure. So this is a given. All these three questions, there is no...
Thank you.
This one? Downward.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal.
There's a downward. What is the meaning of this? Our definition of urban seriously has a downward bias.
Yeah, because it restricts, I just talked about it, it restricts our proportion of percentage that's urban, right? Because we have only 31% urban population in our country, but this is actually a downward number is what I think Professor Peter
No, it's madam, here I think Karnataka is 40% say.
Correct,
this is
correct.
If we take 15,000 as the population, if you take constitutionally 5,000 as a population, which is there, it's 75% of Karnataka is actually urban. So you'll have to go back to the definition thing about that.
Right. Exactly. I think that's what he's actually implying. That's what he's referring to, that we have a downward bias in the way which we define our urban area. Professor Mathur, you want to go?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You're muted, Professor Mathur. You need to unmute. We can't hear you. You're still on mute.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Please, yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure about the definitional issue. It has been going on for quite some time. The economic survey of 2016-17 said that if we were putting a threshold of 5,000 people, then we would be this much. If we put a threshold of 2,500, what you are saying essentially, Kala, is, as Abhay was talking about, that if assume that we are 45, 50, or 60% urban, our population to GDP ratio, even if it is recalculated on the basis of the revised definition, we would be among the most productive countries in the world. Is that what you want to say? I thought even, take 2011, 31.2%, GDP is 53.2%. That seems to be the right ratio to me. If this 31.2% was really 50 or 55 or 45, 48, and if you are also raising the GDP proportion corresponding to the definition, we would become among the most productive countries in the world. Is that what you want to say? That's one point. Second, I do not know whether you've seen the technical group on population projections 2019 report. It has come now, it is not May. And according to the 2019 report, India would still be only 34% urban in the year 2021. Rising only from 31 to 34, not just that, the growth rate would be the lowest ever since we started having the census of India. It would be only 2.2% AGR. Now, that is a kind of a prospect that the technical group on population projection has come out with just a few months back. The report was in public domain just about I think about a month back. So you see and I'm not surprised at it, because if you take the 2011 census and compute the growth rate of statutory towns, leaving aside census towns aside, statutory towns have grown by only 2.2% per annum during the decade of 2001, 2011. And those statutory towns do not respect the consensus towns, the census. They are just there because these are administrative towns. So your suggestion of, number one, changing the definition. You remember, you go through the previous report. I mean, other census commissioners have very clearly said that the difference between a small town and a large village in India is zero, virtually zero. And the only difference is an infrequent lamp post. It was a very interesting description by one of the census commissioners in the pre-partition India, saying that the definition, that the distinction between a small town and a panchayat is virtually zero. Virtually zero. They're the same. And I thought that Ashok Mitra, when he came out with his 3-4 classification, the density part, the occupation part, and the population size part, did a marvelous job of distinguishing between what really is urban and what is not urban. So I would think to sort of disagree on the definition issue. What Abhay's larger question is that even without the discussion that we are having, the lack of decentralization and affordability, and I think those are even without the context of COVID-19, I would agree with that we have too little decentralization, we have too little autonomy at the local level, We have paid no attention to affordable housing at all. So all these, what I said, are very, very valid comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mathur. I know that the ADB has done a lot of work on estimating urbanization based on nighttime, night light intensity. So Rana, I would like you to respond.
But you would also see another report of the World Bank where they have used a combination of the ground level factors and the above the ground level factors. And the calculation of that is exactly 34% in 2011. When you combine the above the ground indicators and light and so on and so forth, and below and on the ground, the percentage is 34. I can send you the reference of that paper. I have that paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Rana.
Yeah, Kala, I think this is a very important point, and why this matters, is simple. You look at a city like Indore. Now, Indore has a certain there's a statutory city of Indore. And if you use economic census data and you ask the question, what makes Indore tick? What's the economic drivers of Indore? What makes it different from other parts of India? You will come up with a couple of service sectors. And then you'll say, yeah, okay, it's a service sector economy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, go look at the satellite images. And what you will find is that outside of Indore, you have the cantonment area. You have a small little cluster of industries. And these are basically places where there's a lot of automotive, machinery and equipment, electrical equipment manufacturing taking place. Now, what happens is that when you miss this phenomena and you just start thinking, I think everyone over here agrees that there needs to be more decentralization. Local authorities need larger stake in economic development. We see that all over. But in the case of India, we see actually municipal authorities have relatively limited functions. The problem kicks in is when you're actually having a lot of important economic activity taking place outside the statutory boundaries. So it's not just a question of the city authorities not having enough power on what's happening inside the city. The fact of the matter is that you have a lot of activity outside the city, and that is very symbiotic with what's happening in the city. Fundamentally, we really need much more metropolitan governance. In fact, Dr. Abhay Pete was making that point to me, and I completely agree with it. And so we do need to be thinking of more expansive definitions of cities. Otherwise, we're going to miss really some of the key engines. And in fact, I've heard, some of these researchers saying, urban, forget it, don't worry about it, because actually Indian industry is moving outside of cities. That is wrong. Yes, in a narrow technical sense, when you look at NSS data, when you look at ASI data, yes, the factories are located in what's technically called a rural area. The reality is these are very integrally related to the city, and we really need to think about governance in a more holistic and broader way. I'll stop there, Kala.
Thank you, Rana, because I just want to quickly refer to the World Bank report.
Professor Kala, I just want to ask one question to
No, just 1 minute, Dr. Anil. We are just allowing Professor Mavrotas now to respond to this question, and then we will go to the next question in the chat box.
Well,
just
thank you very much.
1 minute. Thanks. Yeah, Professor
thank you.
Mavrotas.
Just a very quick reaction to one of the comments. I would say very important one, the one on housing. I have to say, I think this is a very important issue, not only related to what we experience right now in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also in a way, it tells us something more than that. It's about the overall linkage between the urbanization process and the sustainable development goals, okay? Because everything is related to that, in the sense that better housing certainly will affect a lot the whole process in connection with a pandemic in the next few months, but also after that. take into account the fact that right now we're talking about 24%, as I said, of the urban population living in informal settlements and slums. But also the other issue, which is also related to that, is the water and sanitation, for example, figures which are quite alarming. We're talking about 30% of the global population lacking safely managed drinking water. We're talking about 55% of basically more than 4 billion people of the world population lacks safely managed sanitation services. We cannot talk about social distancing and hygiene approaches in connection with our fight, as I said earlier, against the pandemic without doing something about this. But this is something more than that. It's a big picture I mentioned earlier in connection with regarding the overall nexus between the urbanization process and, of course, the sustainable development goals. I think this is an opportunity for us to delve deeper into this particular nexus, taking into account the lessons emanating from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Mavrotas. Now, because of the limited time, what I would like to do is, we are already at 5:30. I would like to just go about reading this next question on the chat box, which is, how far the health burden of COVID-19 could be tackled by the private hospitals, especially for the poor urban dwellers, either free of cost or at a subsidized rate. And this is in the context of Karnataka. I think this seems to be to Dr. Vishal.
The best thing which happened initially was the government of Karnataka took a decision that any patient who is picked up through our registration will be treated free of cost, depending on certain number of beds. So we had allocated 3 types of beds. One is the normal beds. The second is beds which required high flow ventilation. The third is the ICU. 50% of beds we took over. Initially, there was resistance. Then we had to actually wield regulatory force and take over. Fortunately, at many places, 100% occupation of beds did not happen. And there has been some pending bill, but we have been able to take care of each and every patient. COVID care centers actually turned out to be a blessing, as I mentioned. Many of the milder cases or asymptomatic cases we were able to manage at a much reduced cost. So the financial implications were there, but we were able to manage on it much better. And you can take the feedback across people who have actually undergone treatment. If they have been registered with us under the portal which we had done it, 100% free COVID care hospitalization has been given. If they have gone on their own, many patients we have converted it at our end because they could not afford. Because we realized they were poor people in a hurry, but some people, because they wanted the best of care, they have spent on their own and they have gone. So this is the various modalities which actually has worked out in Karnataka. Presently, many of the beds are vacant.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. So there's one other interesting question from Ramakrishna Nallatiga, which says that functional domain difference also mattered in the response of cities to the pandemic. So in the sense that cities with a strong health function were able to respond strongly when compared to those where the function was in the hands of the state government. Is lack of progress on functional devolution one of the reasons for the differential response, or whether it will accentuate the funds crunch in the absence of concomitant financial devolution? I think Professor Mathur and Dr. Vishal may kindly respond to this, given the focus of your presentations.
One is the preventive health is a responsibility of all local bodies, preventive health, but it's like immunization, vaccinations, etc. But medical part is available only in corporations and not all the corporations. Now, Maharashtra and Gujarat, they fall in a different category. Delhi, once again, giving the example of Delhi. Delhi municipal corporations have 3 big hospitals under their control, and they also deal with them. Otherwise, becomes really a state-level responsibility, but preventive is common in all municipalities all over the country. Now, whether municipalities have the capacity to be able to deal with the medical component is anyone's sort of guess. Maybe bigger corporations, yes, but not the small ones, not the small ones. So and therefore they go to the district hospital or they go to the nearest big city where they have. But in terms of the responsibility, that is the division as per the municipal acts.
Yeah, I think Delhi is a very specific example of a city state. So what applies to Delhi probably will not apply to Jharkhand or Odisha or Karnataka, right? But anyway, your point is well taken, Professor.
No idea about Karnataka. Let Vishal sort of take over.
Yeah. Madam, it's clear BBMP has its own primary health centers, urban primary health centers, as I was mentioning. So they have maternity centers. See, ultimately, when I saw the finances of BBMP, which you are also aware, madam, they have tied funds and untied funds. Untied, they can do so many things. They prioritize roads, drains, smart cities on that. They can actually invest back into cities for health infrastructure. The present BBMP commissioner, who's actually in his third term, almost 4 or 5 years experience, he kept on telling the councillors much before that, invest a little more into health. The roads, drains, we will get special packages, do. But they had actually apportioned the money again for drains and roads, and that's come back to haunt them. Presently, BBMP is actually depending on state gratis in order to get work done. But ideally, if we are able to prioritize health, preventive health, as well as health care delivery, it works in bigger cities. Smaller cities don't have that bandwidth. I totally agree with Professor Mathur on that. At that time, the health department has to kick in strongly on that. One more thing which I've repeatedly felt is unless we bring the private sector to be partners in our healthcare delivery, in our preventive healthcare delivery, we will not succeed. They have to become Indian Association of Pediatrics, the IMA, etc. All of us have to work together on this. Then we do it much better, much better.
Yeah, definitely, sir. Thanks a lot for that response. I think we are running out of time, but I think Dr. Anil Vadiraju had a quick question. If you have a pointed short question, Dr. Anil, do you want to just
No,
take
madam.
a question?
No.
He's not there?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think one other gentleman here, I think Sabyasachi Tripathi wanted to ask a question orally. Sabyasachi, are you there? Yeah. Just unmute yourself and be pointed in your questions.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much for the opportunity. And
Yeah.
I just want to thank to Dr. Rana for a positive role of cities in this pandemic time, where many people are saying that cities are the culprit of this pandemic, number of cases and all increasing. But here, I just want to show one diagram only, just one point only to show is here. Can you see one diagram? Just quick point only, just 1 minute.
Yeah, we can see it.
See this one.
Yeah, we can see it.
In this diagram, you see that here the x-axis shows that percentage of urban population in states, in different states, and y-axis it says that number of migrant return to the states. Okay, and see where we see that urbanization has a problem, that number of cases increasing, but in India mostly affected by the number of migrant returned to the village. The main problem happened. But see, this figure shows that those states have higher percentage of urbanization. They have less number of migrants returned. So
what is your quick point here?
The point is that this is the positive impact of urbanization has also. People are saying that if a higher urbanization is bad for this pandemic, but I say at least there is some point that urbanization has also a positive impact on the number of migrant return, less migrant returns. So this is good for this pandemic time, which positive effect on urbanization on this one. So my point is,
thank you, Sabyasachi, for that optimism for our cities in the context of this pandemic. If there are no other questions, I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists, Professor Mavratas, who joined all the way from UK at a different time, and Professor Mathur, Dr. Vishal amidst his busy schedule, Dr. Rana Hassan, who is fortunately here in Delhi for us, for your excellent presentations and thoughtful debates and discussions in response to the questions. Now, I think I should hand over to the director, Professor Madheshwaran, for the closing remarks. Professor Madheshwaran?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, I just thanked all our distinguished panelists for their excellent and thought-provoking presentations and discussions. And I would like to thank Professor Mathur for his excellent and presentation on a topic on which there is very little hard data. And
Right.
I appreciate all the time that went into these presentations. So over to you, Professor Madheshwaran.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Kala. Of course, it's a wonderful and thought-provoking webinar. And this webinar, I hope it will be a catalyst to have more collaboration with the ADP and University of Toronto and with the government of Karnataka, and as well as with Belgium, University of Antwerp, and I foresee that. So that we will come out with a very good collaborative work in the near future. Of course, always Isaac go for our colleagues. Normally, they have been doing a lot of collaborative work, and this particular webinar, I consider that one of this catalyst to to have a collaborative work in the near future. And on behalf of Isaac fraternity, I thank Professor Mathur. Amidst of this time difference, Professor Mathur and Professor George, there's a time difference. Of course, Professor Rana is here in Delhi, so there's no problem. Otherwise, he will also have a time difference. So I thank Professor Mathur.
I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the University of Toronto. I live in Delhi.
Okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sparing your time to have a discussion. Yeah. Is there any?
So thank you very much, Satish, for excellent coordination with
still I just because there is some technical.
Okay.
I also thank Professor George and Professor Rana, Dr. Rana, and Dr. Vizal. Dr. Vizal always, as usual, busy. Amidst of his busy schedule, that you spend at most near about 3 hours, almost 3 hours. That's a very precious time in the government, 3 hours. And so, on behalf of Isaac fraternity, on behalf of my colleague Professor Kala, and we thank all of you for sparing your time and had a wonderful discussion on COVID-19 and cities. I hope, as I told, once again, I reiterate that this particular webinar will become a collaborative research in the near future with the Center for Urban Studies under the leadership of my colleague, Professor Kala. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you, and take care and stay safe. Bye. Bye.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rana. Thank you, Professor Mathur, Professor Mavrutas, and all of you stay safe. Thank you, Professor Madheshwaran.
Bye-bye.
Bye.